Good evening. I call to order this meeting of the Concord Planning Board on Tuesday, February 20th, 2024 at 7 p.m. This hybrid meeting will be recorded for future on-demand viewing. Welcome to everyone attending this meeting. I'll take attendance of members and staff. Rob Almeida.
Here.
Sue Felshin. Here. Mark Giddings.
Here.
And I, Linda Miller, am present, which means that we reach a quorum. Town Planner Elizabeth Hughes is attending by Zoom, and Heather Carey from the Planning Division is here in person. Thanks to both of you and Elizabeth from vacation. We appreciate your getting us through to start this meeting. I'll briefly review our meeting procedures. Each vote will be conducted by roll call. There will be public participation during certain portions of the meeting. Those participating in the audience wishing to make a statement or ask a question during public participation periods should approach a microphone to be recorded for the record. Those participating remotely should use the Zoom raised hand function or *9 on a phone and wait to be recognized. Once recognized, you may unmute yourself in Zoom or use *6 from a phone and then speak. When you speak, please address the chair, identify yourself by name, address, and any relevant affiliations, and speak clearly for the meeting record. Comments during public participation are limited to 3 minutes or less, except for extenuating circumstances, such as for those with disabilities, and are requested to be respectful. Answers to questions, unless very brief and fact-based, will be deferred for follow-up at future meetings. The board welcomes written comments at any time instead of or in addition to those made during public participation. We'll now go to the first item on the agenda, and that is the public hearing for Scenic Roads Bylaw, Rules, and Regulations. So the final draft of the proposed Scenic Roads Bylaws, Rules, and Regulations have been sent to planning board members and posted on the planning board website. So the first question is, are there any further comments from the planning board members on the final draft?
Well, I have one, which
Okay.
is that I was traveling around Concord. I was up by along Monument Street, and I noticed that the stone walls in that vicinity have a whole lot of wall where sections of a wall consist of a single rock, or are multiple rocks wide, but only one rock tall. So there has been a certain amount of discussion about whether a wall had to consist of stones stacked upon stones or not. And much of that wall would not qualify if we do not put in some sort of height measurement. So I would like to encourage us to address that issue or abandon a lot of stone walls. I also noticed that in front of the Old Manse, in numerous sections, it looked like, because there's a height differential between the road and the meadow in front of the manse, a lot of wall sections had fallen over backward into the slightly lower section. So that is a wall in disrepair, and I'm not sure at this moment what we said, if anything, about a stone wall in disrepair, but I imagine there must be other stone walls in less visible portions of Concord. Do we have a provision for documenting a stone wall's condition so that we can call it historic? And even if later it falls into disrepair, it still qualifies as a stone wall? Do we need such a thing? Are we comfortable simply with saying that a wall has a minimum height? And the minimum height in some places along Monument Street was about 1 foot on the higher level, but 2 or 3 feet on the lower level because of the significant height differential in that area. So 1 foot is not much.
Would it be helpful to put up the definition of stone wall that's in the?
Yes, I think that would.
Heather, that's on
Be
page
helpful for
2
all.
of 7.
I think there's a variety of stone walls around town, okay, and some are quite clearly well-defined, good-looking stone walls, some too good-looking, as you know, okay, some are typical farmers' walls, which is what historically we've looked for, okay? Some just have one or two stones that are kind of approved, coming up out of the ground, if you will, okay? I don't think we're gonna be able to define every stone wall or put in enough to define every stone wall in town. I think there's just too many vagaries to it, okay? I think most of us know what a stone wall looks like when we see it, okay? And I think if there's any question, then the planning board should make a decision on it when it comes before us, okay?
Okay. And I certainly agree that we're not going to be able to cover every single stone wall in town with any decision, with any definition that doesn't also capture far too many things that really shouldn't be considered stone walls. They're just some rocks in front of somebody's yard to keep the neighbors from driving over it for some other purpose. But if we have a definition that says this is a stone wall and that isn't, then we do not have the freedom to make a determination when somebody comes before us to say what is or is not a stone wall. We could make the definition be more subjective, but if we make it objective, then that's the definition. And I'm not even making a claim that we have to put in a minimum height requirement. I'm just saying that these are some pretty prominent stone walls in Concord, and if we don't even cover them, I wonder if we're in trouble.
But doesn't it state that we have a minimum height requirement in there? It doesn't state what it is, but it has to have some definition of height.
Right, so I was wondering within the definition as it is, because I did look at the photographs that you sent, and it seemed to me that the definition would not allow any of those to escape. That is, if someone owned that property and they said, I don't have to
Comply because it's
comply
not a
with the
wall.
bylaw because it's not a wall, I didn't feel like that would be a legitimate argument, because,
Because it simply says minimum height requirement and doesn't say what that is.
right,
Yeah, well, this is kind of why I was looking at the old man's, because that's way less clear because of the slope nature of the ground, and the wall sort of just slides on down. I didn't send those pictures because I didn't get them until yesterday. Actually, I did email them to Heather, but they haven't been shared with the
But
board.
it's not uncommon for a stone wall to have sunken in height, okay, over
Right,
time,
right.
because there's dirt has been piled around or just moved up or whatever, the road's been redone and stuff. We had a stone wall in front of our house that just had, a couple of stones here and there, okay? Now, we rebuilt it so that it is a clearly defined stone wall, but
Yeah.
I think anybody that looked at it would have said that's a stone wall, okay? Even though some of the stones were just only a little bit up, but you could see from the street that it was a stone wall.
Well, I am okay with saying minimum height requirement, but I will point out that it is a very unclear and vague.
Nebulous, yeah. See,
Nebulous. Yeah,
I'm cool with that, okay?
okay, if everyone is cool with
But no,
that,
that's just my decision.
okay,
Right.
but I really thought wanted to raise the
Yeah,
issue
it's a good
because we
point.
seem to have some idea from our previous work and everyone's previous work on this topic. The expert who wrote up about stone walls, none of the examples resemble the ones I was looking at, so I thought I should raise the issue.
It's a good point. I think we worked hard to try to define a stone wall. It's difficult to do.
yeah, I think the conclusion
Right,
is it's
yeah,
difficult to
right,
do,
right.
but, yeah.
Oh, wait a second, no, it doesn't just say minimum height requirement, it says minimum height requirement either by having stones on stones or by having single stones of at least a foot high. And under that definition and taking the higher ground level in front of the old manse, large portions would not qualify on the uphill side being at least a foot high.
It also has to be in the public right for us to even discuss.
True, true. I actually did not bother to look up on Concord, just sorry. Oh, I'm sorry. Name and address.
Oh, Andrea Solomon, 75 Ash Street. I'm on the Public Works Committee, but I'm more or less just here from my own interest.
Yeah, just being a stickler. Yes, and I didn't check on Concord GIS whether it qualified. And I didn't mean to say that we should cover that wall specifically, just that if that one is like that, there must be plenty of others that are like that. That's all.
That's why we worked so hard on that definition.
It's really hard. It's really, really hard. If measured from the lower side, it is at least a foot high. So
Well,
we could go
then,
for it.
I think you
And
know,
they're mostly abutting, especially if you scrape away a little dirt.
So can we sell you on that definition of a stone wall?
until we come up with a better one and amend it.
Well, we can certainly sell me on it
But I
because,
don't-
we're not gonna be able to preserve every wonderful thing of history without, turning ourselves into colonial Williamsburg. And this would cover a lot of walls without covering absolutely everything.
Thanks.
Any other comments, questions from the board? Anyone in the immediate audience here at Kais Road that has any questions, thoughts on the rules and regulations as they stand?
I'm here, Solomon,
Yes.
did you ever come to a conclusion about whether the fee for the violation can be assessed daily? Because when we worked on that, we did not find anything, even cross-referencing with Mass General Law, that it can be a fine or fee that you could apply daily.
Elizabeth
I
stated that it was.
I think that under the enforcement penalty, can we go to page 7? It's the very last thing.
Elizabeth has a hand up too.
Oh, okay.
So penalties are, those are in our, the, what is it? Can go to the end, Heather, it's the so there's a separate list of,
See it,
Right there.
what is that?
you're kind of pushing me.
Regulations,
Keep
or
leaning.
what is it? Non-criminal disposition of violations. That list has every violation's fines that are on it, and it states that each day is considered a separate offense. And that's consistent with most other penalties or fines for other bylaws or general bylaws in the town.
Nonetheless, in these rules and regulations, it only refers to what is standard for the town. So whatever is standard for the town is being followed here. So there's nothing here that says daily.
So
So-
the fee would not be assessed daily or.
Whatever the town does now, it would also do under this bylaw.
Okay.
And if the town makes the determination that it's daily fine, as Elizabeth says, then it would be assessed daily. And if the town doesn't follow that practice, then it wouldn't be followed. So,
Because for instance, for the tree bylaw, you would get one fine of $500.
Right.
But not a
Daily.
daily fine of $500.
Yeah.
So that's the practice that's being held there.
right. So I can't speak for what the town's current practice is or what they might interpret it in the future, but whatever the town decides, this wouldn't override it or change it in any way because it only refers to that appendix.
Okay, because if you read that appendix, if you go to Mass General Law and read that, it also doesn't say that you can apply it to you.
Right.
Okay, so it's
No,
up to.
no, it's stated in the non-criminal disposition of violations, which is a separate town document.
Okay. So that means you are charging it daily?
According to Elizabeth, yes.
Okay,
And according to the
It-
current,
It
And
ca-
according
and that would be similar, that's similar to the building commissioner and zoning violations. Those are also each offense each day can be considered a separate offense. So it depends on how it is listed in the non-criminal disposition of violations.
okay, because the wording is similar to the bylaw that handles the shade trees, which isn't assessed daily.
So I don't know how the public shade tree is listed in the town's bylaw for non-criminal dispositions.
Okay,
You'd have to refer to that document.
right, which is $500 once. All right, that's my question. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm sure it'll come up for you guys.
Um, I don't. Elizabeth-
Hopefully not. I mean,
Hopefully
you know,
not.
that's right, okay, so-
Right, and I don't know if the planning board has the responsibility to assess fees, at least. I hope I'm not chair at that point. Because I haven't been had to be a collector
Five
yet.
people, so-
But we will see, yeah. Any other questions? I think we have some on Zoom.
Yeah, we have Renata Pomponi, it's one person.
Renata,
Hello.
hello.
Hi, I'm Renata Pomponi. I'm the sanctuary director at Brewster's Woods Wildlife Sanctuary for the Mass Audubon property on 221 Balls Hill Road.
Yes.
And as you know, our property has a scenic road along one side with stone walls and trees that give incredible character to that road and which we really treasure. At the same time, we are strongly committed to safety of travel on the road for visitors, for our staff who commute, and for our staff who reside in the property. And so I had two questions for you. I was really pleased to see the allowance for safety measures written into these rules. And we do routinely work with the Public Works Department, but we also work a lot with the fire department. And I didn't see them mentioned as a group that could be consulted on safety matters and be part of that decision making. So that's one question I have is, has the fire department been involved in looking at these rules? And my second question is, what is the process for agreeing that an exemption for safety or for any of the other rules that you lay out here is appropriate? You know, who decides that? What is how does that come about? Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to see if Elizabeth has any response to that. I do not know if the fire department was part of this process.
So the fire department would be part of the process. If somebody were to file an application for a scenic roads alteration permit, and part of that documentation and the reasons for the removal of a stone wall was safety, then that application would, and if the application says, for, emergency vehicle access, at that time, the application would be sent to Public Works Engineering and then also be sent to the fire department for their input.
Elizabeth, what about the opposite situation where the fire department is doing due diligence for its ability to access properties in the town, and it finds, for example, a tree which it thinks is blocking fire engines from making safe passage? Does it then have any ability to say, we think this tree needs to be removed for safety reasons? Or would they approach Public Works and say, we think this tree needs to be removed, and then Public Works, if I recall correctly, under the bylaw, can take emergency action for safety reasons?
The fire department would approach the tree warden,
Mm.
and the tree warden would make a determination on that. So but the removal of the tree, if the fire department says, that tree for safety purposes needs to be removed, they would not need a scenic roads permit to do that. They're not making any roadway alterations. So, but they would
Right.
need a permit from the tree warden.
Thank you.
Does that, were those responses helpful?
Yeah, very, very helpful. So can you just clarify, would a property owner who wanted to claim an exemption then still be applying and filling out the application and indicating a safety reason? Or are you exempt from having to go through that part of the process as well? When does the decision get
I
made?
believe
Before
the
or after the
exemption is
application?
only for public works. I believe the exemption for those safety issues is only for public works, for an actual exemption. A private property owner would still have to go through the scenic roads alteration permit. One of the findings they would have to address would be a safety measure.
I see. Okay, thank you.
Okay, I think, can you see who the
Yes, I
other?
have a Brandon and Nancy Bukes, I think.
Mr. Bukes?
You're on
you-
mute?
Yes, you'll have.
No, it's that-
Great.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to comment on these, which has clearly taken a lot of work. But we get stuck at certain places with even the definition of a stone wall. So when we go to 146, and it says to alter the form, materials, or appearance of the historic wall. And I don't know quite what historic means in that context. Where we live at October Farm on Monument Street, where the house was built starting in 1744, I can share with you photographs of Monument Street in 1905. And there are no stone walls along the street, as you can see. If I don't know if it
Well, we
comes.
can't actually see, but we believe you.
Okay, well, I can share, I apologize, I should have prepared them before. So not everything is, quote, historic, unless we define historic as, say, existing at the time of adoption of this bylaw. Because we do tend to think that everything that's here in town, that was here before we moved here or something, is, quote, historic. But that, if someone were to take down a stone wall and completely remove it along the side of Monument Street, where there's a stone wall now, and said, well, we're simply restoring that to the condition that it was in 1905 per William Brewster's photograph, would that be considered removing a historic wall?
So maybe we should strike the word historic, okay? Because your point is well taken. There's an awful lot of walls around town that we're trying to protect that wouldn't be defined as historic. They aren't in front of the Barrett farmhouse or someplace like that, okay? So maybe that's just a misplaced word. I don't know. I'm asking.
I know we discussed this in the past. I thought, but now I can't remember how we handled it. I thought we attempted to handle this to say that a wall did become historic after it's been built or after some period of time. Because we did want it to cover even a wall that's built modernly after it becomes historic.
Well, this is
Heather,
this is
can
the
you scroll
concern.
up to the definition?
That's under the,
So every application that gets submitted, besides going to the Public Works
That's it.
Department, it also goes to the Historical Commission. So I think that's an important step as well, in getting their input on any application that comes in.
Meaning
Well,
that it's historic if they say it's historic.
Well, perhaps we can, if we said an existing wall, we might remove some basis of discussion and argument. Because there are walls which, well, for example, on Monument Street, there've been several walls that we know near where we live, which have been constructed de novo. And one of these is done traditionally with gray stone. There's another wall somewhat closer to Carlisle where the builder putting in the stone wall actually put in a red stone, a lot of iron in it. And it's a wall that's inconsistent with all the other walls along Monument Street. But in fact, I think that even Minuteman Park, who's had a problem with people stealing stones from the walls, because they want to build their fireplace with, you know, stones from Concord or something, and it replaced some of the nice traditional gray stones with red stone for the convenience of the thief. So it's perhaps we resolve it by saying existing and define existing as conditions as of the adoption of the bylaw, because you know, the first definition of historic byways was actually many years ago, and the roads look quite different now than they did at the time when that list was first created.
Yes,
Yeah, Sven Weaver, 50 Bellner, also member of the Public Works Commission. Section 232 is actually talking about historic character. But one thing, just to wind back a little bit, this bylaw is only touching walls that are public right of way. So if the property owner builds something new on their property, this is not affecting anything that sits on your property.
Mhm.
New stone walls in the public right of way should have been constructed by Public Works in the first place. So
In modern times.
in modern times. So I think it's the walls in question are walls that over time kind of suddenly are in the public right of way and perhaps constructed 100 years ago. And suddenly we figure out that's public right of way. But if it's done on your property, this thing is doing nothing.
Right.
But look at 2.3.2, I think it's a section.
can.
Historical character and value.
It's on page 4, towards the bottom, historical
Yep.
character and values.
It will get us, well, it's going to lead to some interesting discussion, I think, because there's not a lot of historic buildings, for example, on Monument Street. And
Well,
there
but-
are some, including the one we live in. So I think that that's reasonable. I don't have any argument in respect to 232. It will be discussable, but I think that's the way it is. Here's the historic appearance of Monument Street. That's
but on the other hand, you've just made an
1904.
assumption.
so not 1774, 1904.
Yes, but you've just made an assumption that historic means really old, whereas historic means what people say it means. Maybe people think it means 50 years when it comes to the demolition delay bylaw, it's 50 years. So there are possibly a great many historic homes along Monument Street by somebody's definition.
All right. Well, I think I thank you for the opportunity to bring this up. I think perhaps it might be if historic is defined as existing as of the time of the adoption of the bylaw, then it represents the status quo. And if people love Monument Street or any of the other streets, Balls Hill Road or Liberty Street, the way it looks now, then it's appropriate for the Planning Board and the Historic Districts Commission to respect that people like it the way it is. You will recall that the National Park Service removal of trees along the Battle Road came up with quite a lot of opposition. And because nobody remembered it as forest, nobody remembered it as other than forest, but in fact, the National Park Service has said, well, actually in 1775, that was open farmers' fields. And so restoration is a challenge. Thank you for a chance to bring it up. I'm going to just suggest that perhaps in 232, we say, either we define historic as existing as of the time of adoption or something that will give you less work in the future. Thank you.
Thank you for the suggestion. Would anyone wish to discuss further the suggestion?
Well, we did take this up earlier, and we specifically didn't want our conclusion, and when I say us, I mean not just the planning board, but we were discussing with the historic commission and Public Works probably as well, that we did not want to say as of adoption of the bylaw, because we specifically wanted to allow for walls that get built after adoption of the bylaw to qualify under the bylaw, at least at such time as they may be considered historic. Now, Reiner makes an interesting point about whether historic should be pinned down more, or even whether it should be pinned down more simply to say historic means whatever the historic commission says it means. But I don't know if we want to try to wordsmith that at this time, or just let the word historic be interpreted that way.
I would suggest that, there will be applications and there will be the need to apply, these rules and regulations to those applications. And at that time, in those particular circumstances, it would be best to leave the interpretation to those who know better than we can envision now. And so at that point, then the planning board will have to do their work. And
I
listen
think that would
to
become
comments.
self-evident. I think if
Yeah.
you look at it, you'll know that that's an appropriate stone wall. Okay,
Yeah.
so.
So thank you so much for your comment, and please come back to any meetings where interpretation is required, because that group will need quite a bit of help as well. So I will
So
see.
Linda, can I make just one other comment?
Oh, yes, please
To
do.
Sue's point. Nobody else will be allowed to build a stone wall that will qualify under this bylaw. Public Works is not going to allow somebody to build a stone wall that is into the road right of way or on the boundary of the right of way and private property. Somebody, if they want to build a new wall on the front of their property, they will have to build it within their property. So it wouldn't, as Mr. Weber said, it would not even qualify under this bylaw for any new stone wall to be built. So, I mean, we are effectively talking about, stone walls that are right on the property line. The face of the wall is either on the property line or the stone wall is actually in the public road right of way.
Yes, there's a very unlikely case where the town would choose to adopt a private road as public that had a stone wall in it, but that is extraordinarily unlikely.
I'm not sure even if, well, that's a hypothetical.
It is,
We'll leave
yeah.
it to future generations. So, are there any additional comments from the public here? No, if not, so then I think we could move forward with a motion to approve anyone like to make that motion, or shall I, make a motion to approve the proposed scenic roads bylaw rules and regulations as stand? Is there a
I
second?
second it.
I will, ask for, a roll call vote. Mr. Giddings?
Yes.
Myself, yes. Linda Miller? Sue Felshin? Aye. Rob Almeida? Yes. Thank you very much, for all participating in this. And
A lot of work.
it's been a lot.
A lot
a
of people's
lot of
time.
work. But I think we all, are in a good place in terms of this, scenic roads bylaw. So that's great. We'll now move to a discussion of a recommendation to the ZBA for Howard J. Sober Jr. for a special permit with site plan review under zoning bylaw sections 4.2.3, 7.2, 7.7.2.12, 11.6, and 11.8 for combined business residence use in the floodplain conservancy district and relief from parking for 33 parking spaces at 166 Commonwealth Avenue, parcel number 2184-2. And I'm sorry, I don't have a full screen here, so if the applicant could identify themselves. And we would like to use this opportunity, if possible, if they would like to provide us with an update and address any issues or concerns that the planning board and town staff have with the application.
Good evening, Madam Chair and members of the planning board. I'm Tom Falwell with the firm of Combs and Newbury, Damon Mill Square here in Concord. We're acting as counsel for 166 Commonwealth Ave, Concord LLC, whose affiliated entity, Aris Partners, has the property under purchase and sale agreement with the present owners. We're happy to finally have the opportunity to meet with you this evening to provide you with details of the proposed project in furtherance of hopefully obtaining your support for the proposed redevelopment of the site and a positive recommendation to the ZBA, with whom we meet late next month once they've dealt with the 2 pending comprehensive permits that are presently keeping them busy. By way of one administrative matter, I did want to note, as I did last week with the zoning board of appeals, that the agenda is incorrect, and it says, in so much as it says we are seeking relief for parking for 31 parking spaces. Not quite sure where that number came from. It's actually 14 spaces, and it's been 14 spaces for since the the most recent filings and the filings that eliminated the restaurant. So it's 14, not 31, and we're not sure where that number came from, but just to set the record straight, it's 14 spaces we're seeking relief for. By way of background, our initial filing for this project was made actually last May. As I'm sure you may all be aware, the initial proposal included a restaurant and a small-scale retail space on the first floor and 10 residential units, 5 on each floor on the second and third floors. The inclusion of the proposed restaurant required a need to seek parking relief for a large number of spaces. After a substantial number of meetings with town staff and also meeting with the West Concord Advisory Committee, it became increasingly clear that our chances of obtaining the amount of parking relief required to allow the restaurant to be there were marginal at best, I guess I would describe. So after further discussions with Elizabeth, we went back to the drawing board and to revise the project to eliminate the proposed restaurant in that use. In September, new plans and supporting materials were filed which replaced the proposed restaurant on the first floor with 2 additional dwelling units. At that point, the town engaged peer reviews of the traffic, parking, and stormwater aspects of the proposed project. In early January, we filed an amended application materials, including revised project narrative, a revised set of plans, design / architectural, landscape, and civil, a revised stormwater report and related supporting documentation, response to the transportation peer review letter, and a draft walkway easement and attached plan that is referenced on it. In our discussions with Elizabeth, we anticipated having a required hearing with the board in late January, but in mid-January, Elizabeth advised that town staff and the outside consultants would not be able to provide their input for that proposed meeting, and we would push back to February 6th. That, as you know, did not occur. But on Thursday, February 8th, we did, in fact, meet with the Zoning Board of Appeals at a Zoom meeting to provide the board with details of the proposed project. As a result of our meeting with the Zoning Board of Appeals and matters raised at that meeting, we made some additional minor changes to the plans. And last Friday, I emailed Elizabeth an updated set of plans and supporting materials. There are no substantive changes to the plans from the prior iterations. They involve a modification to the HP space to meet mass imposed requirements. I believe it changed the handicap access ramp and the designation of an additional affordable unit to bring the total up to 3. At that point, I think it might be appropriate for me to try to introduce the development team for 166 Commonwealth Avenue LLC. Anthony Gagliardi is the lead person for the project applicant, but he's out of state and that's not able to join the meeting this evening. The development entity also includes Concord residents Tom Sibley and John Garofalo. I believe Tom is on the call. I'm not sure I saw John. The project engineer and designer of the proposed building is Spruhan Engineering out of Newton. Helen Sebji is the member of the architectural design team at Spruhan, but due to as I understand, a death in her family, she won't be with us tonight. But Oliver Guzman, who is with Spruhan as a civil engineer, is on the call, and he will hopefully, unless Elizabeth's doing it, I'm not sure, maybe it's Oliver's sharing the screen now to show us the plans. For traffic and parking related matters, we have Randall Hart, who's a principal senior project manager from VHB. Stephen Cosmos of Cosmos Associates is a registered landscape architect for the project. And John Rockwood, who's a principal environmental scientist for Ecotech, was handling filings of matters before the NLC, is on the team, but I don't think he's on this call. Obviously, the individuals on the Zoom call tonight would be able to address any questions or comments that the board may have. As to the project, generally the applicant intends to redevelop the site by removing the prior gas station and current vehicle repair and service facility that existed on the site for decades. In its present physical condition and use, most all would, I think, agree that it is not the ideal face we want to present to those entering West Concord from Commonwealth Ave or Lost Brook Road. Clearly, the site has been calling out for some redevelopment for an extended period. The proposed site and floor plans, elevations, landscaping, and civil plans and other documents have been posted on the ZBA's current documents website since January. The most recent revisions of the plans that were sent over on as I alluded to on Friday, are totally consistent with the nature and scope of the January plan. So there hasn't been any real change substantively. In summary form, the proposal is to remove the current service station building, underground fuel tanks and associated apparatus and replace it with the new combined residence business building, which, and this is critical to remember, is allowed as of right in the West Concord business zone. I see the plans have been brought up. You can see the outline of the building and where we show the 14 parking spaces, including the handicap space. There are 2 proposed vehicle charging stations at either end of the parking area. One of the changes that was made as a result of the discussions with the town staff and others was, including engineering, was to we first had 1 entrance and 1 exit. It's been revised. The revision included having an exit from the property, as you can see, onto Commonwealth Ave, which is would be constructed in such fashion to allow only a right turn out of that space. You can also see along the Neshoba Brook the proposed green space and the outline of the proposed walkway that would connect Commonwealth Ave, the sidewalk on Commonwealth Ave, and with the property at 152 Commonwealth Ave, and Neshoba Bakery, and ultimately to the rail trail and so forth. I'd ask if you want to go to the next slide. This is a newer addition to the plans from before that shows a pedestrian circulation path diagram for the site, including showing the entrance and exit, and then the exit only, and how the pedestrians would access the site from the parking lot, and the residents would access the parking lot and along the frontage on Commonwealth Ave. And again, on the left-hand side shows the proposed walkway to connect up with the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail. So some of the signage detail with respect to the entrance, the exit onto Commonwealth Ave. Next slide, please, Oliver. One of the things we were asked to do is to show that, in fact, fire apparatus would be able to exit and enter and exit the site in this slide, as well as the next slide, I believe, shows how that would be handled and shows that that can be done in a safe and efficient manner. Next slide, please. We're also, one of the differences in this plan from the original plan, which had a dumpster, trash dumpster outside, is since the restaurant was eliminated, we don't need the amount of trash won't generate the amount of trash that it would be there with the restaurant in place. So the dumpster was eliminated, the need for the dumpster was eliminated, and there is an inside trash room to which all the trash will be brought in, and a trash truck will come in and empty it as needed without the need to, it's a smaller truck. It obviously we don't need a truck large enough to empty a dumpster. And you can see that this slide shows the drive in and drive out route for the trash truck. Next slide, please. One of the questions that came up also was parking spot number 1, which is the one to the far right. Some question was raised as to its ability to drive in and out of that space efficiently. And this slide again shows that is easily doable, so that there are that proposed or that anticipated problem does not exist from the standpoint of being able to show that it can be done without any difficulty. Next slide, please. This is a site plan, again, rather a new plan for this set, but which shows the sight lines. So this was done by VHB, Randy Hart from VHB, that shows the sight lines and in accordance with the normal requirements. Next slide, please. Now we're getting to the building itself. This is the ground floor, the first floor. You can see on the front bottom right, there's the small scale retail space, which is about 1,100 square feet, a little bit less than that. It has its own handicap accessible restroom, and it has entrance from both the parking area and also from Commonwealth Avenue. Next to that, going, I'll call it west from the standpoint of orientation on the plan, is the lobby for the entry for the residential uses. It has package delivery, mail room. It also has a handicap accessible restroom, and shows that lobby. Next to it is a proposed 3-bedroom unit. In the rear, there's a entrance it also shows, the handicap ramp in the front of the building to get from Commonwealth Ave and the sidewalk into the lobby. Around the other side of the building, there is another entrance that you can access from the public walkway easement plan that we'll be creating that gets into the back of that side of the building where there's a provision for bike rack. You'll see there's an electrical and sprinkler room, a management office. You can see down the corridor, there's the trash room, which would be accessible from the outside. The elevator and stairway management office into the rear, the first floor proposed dwelling unit. This shows one of the questions that came up with the Zoning Board of Appeals on the 8th was the number of affordable units were required. We had been all along showing 2 units, and we thought that was an accurate and number that was in keeping with the requirements. The zoning chair raised the question of whether we actually needed 3 based upon the rounding, lack of rounding down, rounding up provision that's in the zoning bylaw with respect to assisted living. There's nothing in the bylaw section that is applicable here with respect to affordable units. So we have added a 3rd affordable unit, and you can see those outlined at the top as to which units those are. Next screen, please. This is the 2nd floor, showing the mix of 1, 2, and 3-bedroom units. You see the corridor, the elevator, and so forth. And that floor, as well as the next screen, which is the 3rd floor, the layouts on those floors are identical. The units are identical. They're mirror opposites of each of them. We could actually skip to the roof plan, since the 3rd floor plan is identical to it. And you see on the roof plan, we've got several amenities. We've got solar panels. We've got a proposed roof garden, one for each of the units, so that each of the residents can have the ability to have a garden, yes, if they wish. There's also a common roof deck, and there are other mechanicals are shown, as well as the head house for the elevator and so forth. Next screen, please. Now we're getting into the elevations. You see the front elevation for the proposed building, and the rear elevation. On the right-hand side, there in the neighborhood form and materials analysis, and showing with the design elements in terms of blending with some of the other structures in West Concord. Next screen, please. These are the left side and right side elevations. And then we get into a series of artist renderings of views on the site from various locations. One of the questions that came up at the Zoning Board of Appeals was we had the parking area for this site backs up at present, and always has, with the parking for 152 Commonwealth Ave. We had proposed a berm to keep that separation. The suggestion was made that was probably not sufficient, and actually could be a tripping hazard. So that has been replaced and shown on the plans as actually as a fence now, as opposed to that small berm. Next slides. You could go through these all over. These are just again artist renderings of views of the proposed project from various locations. You see there, that's the path that would be a pedestrian path that would be open to the public to get from there to 152 Com Ave and to the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail. Again, front elevation, you'll see on the right-hand side is the entrance to the pro scale retail. In the middle is the entrance to the residential units. And on the left-hand side there's some screening that's shown because that's a residential unit, and we felt the designers felt that for privacy reasons, there'd be some screening would be appropriate in that instance. Again, just another view looking towards Commonwealth Avenue and showing that side of the building. You're showing the blue car is from the exit only space, so you can only turn right from that. Here showing the parking lot. There's an entrance, as you can see, the second entrance to the small scale retail. Under the green awning in the middle, there is the entrance actually to the residential units into the trash room. And you see the parking, and you can see the stat space at the last space number 14 on the plan, as one of the 2 electrical charging units. All of the units have balconies. That's again an elongated look from the other entrance, and again another look from the rail trail. I think that is those are the plans and the elevations. As I said, we're talking about 12 residential units containing a mix of 1, 2, and 3 bedroom units. And again, I reiterate 3 of which are really affordable. Obviously, a key component of this proposed project is the parking provided, and VHB in its February 16 response, which has been filed, addresses this aspect specifically and provides a substantive basis based on recent Mass Area Planning Council study that was done in 2023 of the residential parking in similar situations in Greater Boston, including Concord. And I had asked Randy Hart from VHB to maybe address that as well. Randy?
Sorry, I was on mute. Good evening, everyone. Randy Hart with VHB. Didn't plan on giving a presentation, but I think I can at least touch on some of the response that we had in our memo from last week. In terms of residential uses, there's been a big push by the Regional Planning Agency to try to normalize, if you will, the parking need at residential complexes like this in the area. And so the Metropolitan Area Planning Council has been working for several years on its perfect fit parking research about trying to right size residential parking supply for residential. Phase 4 of that research was done in 2023. It focused on West Metro communities in the area. The research looked at over 36 residential sites in 6 communities and found on an overall basis, the average peak overnight parking demand, which is the critical parking demand, was about 1.0. And in Concord, they actually picked 3 sites that they looked at as part of that research. They looked at Brookside, they looked at Warner Woods, they looked at Prescott at the Concord. And again, with those 3, they were all about just about 1 or so space per unit. So there's good data to demonstrate that that's really what's necessary in the area for the residential. In terms of the commercial, as I think was mentioned, there would be 1 space per each unit for the residential, and then there'd be 2 commercial spaces on site for customers. We looked at the Commonwealth Avenue, the on-street parking on a typical weekday, and then on a typical Saturday, we every half hour went down the street and basically identified the number of parked vehicles for the entire day to get a sense on what the availability would be, knowing that some of the customers that would patronize our facility and possibly even some of the employees would, utilize the on-street parking. And the parking study that we've provided shows you very clearly in bar chart format what the change in parking demand is throughout the day. And through most of the hours of the day, there's a ton of parking available. The peak during the weekday was, I think, 37 spaces were occupied when 45 were available, but that was only for 1 hour. During all the other hours, there was much more available. And then on the peak on Saturday, there was one peak hour that had a total of 42 of the 45. So even during those peak hours, which again only happened for a single hour, there was space available. But throughout all the other hours of the day, there was a lot of space available. So employees that might be, directed to this commercial facility, if they come in the morning, there'd certainly be plenty of space on street based on the parking demand analysis that we've provided. So that's the rationale that we've outlined. A couple additional points on that is, one is, you got to look at the location of the site, right? It's very close to the commuter rail. People will live here, they'll walk to the commuter rail, walk back. So the need for a car at this location isn't as present as it might be in other locations. The on-street parking that I just talked about is right there as well. And there's a lot of ride hauling in this particular area. And there's studies out there that we've seen that shows this is a particularly good area with a lot of availability for that type of service. So, you have some things really working for us on the positive side from the parking front. And MAPC, through their work, is really trying to help, developers and the towns understand the real parking needs so that we stop over parking projects. If there are questions, I'd be happy to try and respond to them as best I can this evening. Thank you.
Would you like to take those questions now, or do you have additional presentations that you'd like to follow up with first?
And I think that fairly well describes the project, and I think at this point in time, we'd be ready to take any questions that you may have or any comments, including those with respect to the parking.
Great. Are there any members of the planning board who would like to ask some questions?
I have a couple of questions, particularly for you, Randy. You mentioned 3 sites that were in the study. I got down Brookside, Warner Woods, and what was the third site?
The Prescott at Concord.
The Muse.
And the source of that, Randy?
MAPC, the regional planning agency, did the counts, and they may hire a consultant to do the counts. But they were done in, I believe, in 2023 at all 3 locations.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
That's it for now.
Is the intention for the parking spots to be assigned per unit?
That's correct. Each of the residential units will be assigned 1 spot, 1 space. There are 12 residential spaces, 12 residential units. So each will have an exclusive right to use one assigned space.
And will you also, do you also intend to designate what spaces are available for retail use, or there will be no retail spaces?
Well, there are 2 retail spaces, spots, and spots 11 and 12 on the plan are designated for retail.
So the question I have here, I'm looking at it right now, you have the handicap space as assigned as residential. How about for the commercial use?
I think in actuality that may be mislabeled. I think the residential space number 14 could be another handicap space. But I think the idea is that actually the retail will have the handicap space in 1 regular space as opposed to residential, because we simply don't know whether any resident of the building will require a handicap space, and you can't, designate one and then have somebody who's not handicapped park in it. So that this gives us the ability, if necessary, to make spot 14, for instance, a residential handicap space as opposed to designated as such without any idea whether there'd be a need for it.
And how are you allocating the the EV spots?
Well, we're not allocating, it would be, you know, the condominium documents will be such that we'll be able to, you know, deal with those people who need a charging station, as opposed to, and if you had two people, one who needed one and didn't, and wasn't assigned to them, there'll be some flexibility that in terms of reallocating which unit has which space based upon the requirements of the residents.
Well, just a suggestion, would you entertain putting, you know, future raceway in to add additional spot, you know, car charging spots? It'll be a lot easier to put it in now than, you know, in the future to dig it all up. If you had to add additional chargers.
We can certainly take that into consideration, yes.
Yes, many projects have been putting in conduit without putting in charging stations everywhere.
And where would you have van loading and unloading?
Van loading for what?
Oh, van loading for deliveries, be they to the retail store or to the residents, be they Uber drivers or food delivery?
Well, I mean, this would be handled pretty much where it's the way it's handled everywhere else. I mean, there's not, certainly there is space that they, on a short term, in that parking area adjacent to the small scale retail that people could, you know, stop and pick somebody up. But oftentimes you see these vans and package deliveries, they pull up front. It's the way of the world. You see it everywhere. So it's no different than any other development in which those types of services find a way to work. And oftentimes we'll drop a package off by just pulling up in front. That's the way.
And the in front would be on Commonwealth Avenue?
That would be if an Amazon driver pulled up there, I suppose it would. I mean, that's what they do everywhere.
There is no shoulder there. And it's also.
There is no parking. There's no parking on Commonwealth Ave in that location. So an Amazon driver would not be able to park in the roadway.
Well, I understand that, but we all know that no parking signs notwithstanding, they do it anyway. I mean, we're not encouraging it. It's just the reality of life. They, you know, drop up and they're in and out, and they don't oftentimes pay no attention to no parking signs, as we see all over, you know, all over Greater Boston.
Tom, this is Tom Sibley just jumping in as well. There will be space, as I think you alluded to, within the parking lot, in the confines of the property for short-term drop-off as you look at the plan kind of up by where there's a side entry. So you're not interfering with egress and certainly not with in and out of the actual parking spaces. And again, this is just temporary Uber driver food delivery, very, very short term. And there is space, we believe, that's contained within the actual property.
But that was shown on your plan for pedestrian movement as where pedestrians would walk in order to get into that door at the south side.
Right, again, we're talking about
if there are food or Uber or package delivery drop-offs, the garbage truck, and there were several other things you showed using that area. Plus it would block one or two parking spaces from being exited or entered, if most likely.
Well, these would be very, very short-term stops. They're not going to be parking there and leaving the vehicles there for long term. So hardly, not likely to be any substantial inconvenience, of any inconvenience to any of the residents who are parking there, because we're not designated as a parking area. There's somebody, as I say, just picking up an Uber rider, and they may be there for 2 minutes.
That's true, but when you consider all of the residences and the retail area and the number of pickups and drop-offs, it begins to become more substantial.
I guess that's, that it's speculative that all of that is going to occur at one time. It's not really likely that that's the case
No, yeah, correct.
in the real world.
So the other concern I have here, looking at it in regards to the parking, is that you have the area designated right at the corner on Com Ave for snow storage. I mean, there's no other snow storage on site that we live in New England, we can get some pretty substantial storms. I mean, is that gonna be an adequate snow storage area for this lot? And not create a obstruction hazard at the
Well,
same time?
I mean, if the storage, if we get, although we haven't had one recently, if we get a storm or series of storms that require, end up with a substantial amount of snow in that area, it would be removed.
Yeah, we would haul like we do in all of our other projects that require it for reasons similar to this.
Okay.
Before we leave, issues of parking, I wanted to ask about space number 1. The way you showed, a driver who was trying to back out of that space, to go onto Commonwealth Avenue. I don't know if you want.
Well, wait, they're both Commonwealth Avenue.
Oh,
Which
sorry.
one?
To go to, they wanted to exit the exit only right turn
Towards the prison.
toward the rotary. Yeah, so, you had a turning radius slide.
Yeah.
Did not,
That's-
was you,
Slide, that's sheet 7.
Trucks.
7. There you are.
right.
I mean, that assumes that they're going head in first as opposed to the alternative as well.
Yeah, it would be a little difficult to have to back into that space pulling in from Commonwealth, but it also looks a little bit awkward to have to back up. What is that? 6 or 8 widths of cars to exit.
I doubt a truck would actually choose to back up that long distance rather than backing up into across the sidewalk and into Commonwealth Ave, heading into West Concord.
So you could possibly mark that for small car only, but anything sizable.
Which we're showing it as a pickup truck, but it could well be a small car. Nowadays, most likely it would be.
I don't understand what the
so-
cost like
so-
would be. Those
By a
cars are
charging-
large.
by
Oh,
a
with the
charging
charging.
Station,
F1,
but you are,
Ford F-150.
yeah, okay.
So Linda, I'd also like to point out there's nothing to preclude somebody from taking a right-hand turn out of the main driveway. So that bottom diagram shows the vehicle taking a left. There's nothing to preclude that driver from taking a right.
Which would probably
So
be more
they
convenient.
don't have to back up the entire parking lot,
Okay,
take a right out of the parking lot. They can take a right from there.
and probably would.
But I did have one question, Tom, you said you're now proposing a fence between this property and the adjacent property.
Yes,
Can you provide a little more detail? I think the Board of Appeals had talked about just kind
Right.
of having a wood
That's-
guardrail,
well, that's,
not necessarily a fence.
well, the actual details of it are, haven't been scoped out, but we're talking about something that's in keeping with the comment by the ZBA as opposed to a simple berm. The details of the design and the height and so forth, can be worked out.
Okay, so I think the Board of Appeals talked about just having just a plain wood guardrail, and not necessarily a fence.
That's
'Cause
totally
it's
fine with
to
us.
keep cars from
Yeah,
pulling forward and having the 2 feet.
yeah, we'd be fine with that. We're just trying to respond to the basic of the gist of the comment.
The other question I had in terms of turning radius was the trash removal. And was that a regular sized trash vehicle? Or I think you said somewhere that it was a small trash vehicle, and is that what you have for your other properties? Or can you assure us that a smaller than normal trash truck would be making those turns?
Yeah, so I mean, this is again, it's not your typical dumpster situation. It's a trash room, and yeah, we're going to hire out privately for this, and so we will be using smaller trucks, and it'd be a much less invasive process than what we typically see in our other projects, and so yeah, we can assure you that.
Okay. I think the other questions I had after parking were really had to do with the sight lines. And I'm not sure if you changed them since the meeting with the zoning board, but I wondered if you could walk us through the sight lines. And I also believe we have our consultant, town's consultant, Sam Gregorio on the line, and he might be able to offer some thoughts on the sight lines as well, mostly because the map here in the room is a little far from some of us.
I'll let Randy handle that question.
Good evening again, Randy Hart. And Ashley from my office is on the line too, so if she has any further insight beyond what I say, feel free, Ashley, to jump in. We did tweak the sightline diagrams just a touch based on some of the nice comments that TEC provided us. I think there's a number of factors at play here, that really play a role. They asked us to provide the sightlines for a vehicle exiting looking to the north, which is a straight line, so something we didn't provide initially, but then we did provide in the latest memorandum that we prepared last week and submitted. We also sort of looked at and tweaked, I guess, the response to our original response, because it wasn't clear as to what we were utilizing for the stopping sight distance looking or coming in this direction for the right turnout driveway. So that was tweaked a little bit. And I believe that TEC had still some comments on it. We've since responded, but we think we meet the minimum requirement for SSD in that location. We do, and we have said that there is an on-street parking space in this location that absolutely plays a role somewhat for our driveway site distance, but it also plays a big role for Neshoba, the bakery as well. And while we don't necessarily believe it's going to be a problem at the end of the day because of some geometric modifications that are happening out here, we did say if after the project's in place, we can monitor it and take a look. And if the speeds aren't what we think they're going to be, we would petition the town to possibly lose that space, not only for us, but for the adjacent land use as well. So we tried to tweak things as best we can. I know TC hasn't had very long to look at this, so I don't know if they have anything more to add. Did I miss anything, Ashley?
No, that's it. And we just added the site triangles. We just shaded those in as well.
Oh, yeah, they wanted it on the site plan as well as the figures that we had created. Yep. So we supplemented it.
Great. San, do you have any thoughts or questions, to follow up?
Everybody can hear me, right? So when I start talking, you can actually hear me. Okay.
Yeah.
I was like, let me try to do that first. So, once again, members of the board, hello again. My name's Sam Gregorio, Senior Traffic Engineer at TLC. We are the peer reviewer on behalf of the town. We haven't fully gone, I guess, the in-depth version of what was presented back to the town on Friday, but in an overall sense, we don't really have any true disagreement with what VHB has shown in their site distance plans. We do agree that looking left out of the main site driveway on the main drag of Commonwealth Ave, their potential conflict with the on-street parking space that's already there, a condition that's there now. So it's not something new to the site, even with the gas station driveway as it is, and obviously combined with the larger opening that the bakery has with it, that particular parking space or two beyond it have the same sightline issue that we would experience in the future. So obviously by separating the driveway, there's a little bit of benefit in that. And that opportunity could arise where the applicant may approach the town as they've discussed, or as Randy discussed a little bit earlier. In the other directions, we believe that or we agree that it should meet the minimum requirements, although very, very close. So the biggest issue coming from there, obviously knowing that some of this is existing condition issues, is just to ensure, and whether that's through conditions of approval that happened at the ZBA, to make sure that, no signage, no vegetation that's within that site triangle area, anything that is in there is less than 3.5 feet or so. And then this comes back to one of the comments that was just brought up about 5 minutes ago, with the snow storage. And to ensure that anything that might end up in that particular area right on the corner for snow storage is basically wiped clean after a storm, or something that would be less than 3.5 feet, because if that sight line is blocked, then that does become the issue, and the snow is the issue. So, but those are things that can be, added in as conditions when we get to ZBA. And obviously there'll be a further look into how these sight lines relate to the final geometric condition that'll be worked out through the applicant, the town, for what might be happening there on terms of the new radius to the roadway curvature and things like that. So some of that might come a little later, but for at least for now, again, TC's in general agreement for what VHPs has shown on the plans and in the study, and what has to happen with, again, that on-street parking space becomes kind of a discussion with the town for what they would want to do, where they see the benefit of whether it is removing that to provide that sightline minimum recommendation, or is the on-street parking space itself more important for what effectively, again, is a existing condition.
And Sam, all of this discussion really is very auto-centric. Do you have any thoughts with regard to the fact that West Concord wants to be a modal transit area, and we need to think about bicyclists and pedestrians in these areas?
Sure, and we had talked about, I think, in our two review letters, and then basically what the applicant has, I think, presented in this meeting and through the ZPA. There are opportunities that they are providing on site for pedestrians. They are connecting with the path back towards the rail trail. We do have a location that's near the commuter rail. They provided pedestrian access building out to street in order to get to commuter rail down the road, about 1,000 feet down the road. And even some of the comments that we did have on the original comment letter that we put together a little over a month ago, talking about different accessibility aspects of the buildings, railings, ramps, appears to, although again, unless there's something in the new letter from Friday that I missed, appear to have been addressed. So in that sense, I think that the facility that they have provided for our showing looks to meet different qualifications for all multimodal use, transit access. I mean, they're not against the train station, but you have to be lucky to have that. But ped bike access through the site and bike access to the buildings, bike accommodations at the building, and obviously vehicular traffic, obviously. But
Thank you.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, please do.
Hi, Sam. You can hear that we have some concerns about parking. Could you comment on that and comment on their comments on parking, please?
sure, and I think obviously, I've been helping out the town separately, full disclosure, with discussions about parking needs,
Right, you and I've
as
had.
part of their zoning
yes.
requirements. So, as part of a separate project.
Right.
So for this particular site, we generally didn't have a concern outright for the residential component and what they were looking for in terms of what relief they may need. One space per unit. Based on especially the information that Randy had presented tonight, from MAPC. And knowing that the residents who would move into this site are, unless I'm mistaken, and correct me if I'm wrong on the applicant side, are basically least specific to their parking space. So it's going to be defined as they actually come to buy this or rent this property, that they know they only have one space. So that does clear up potentially the aspect of whether or not someone may want to. It's just kind of, you can have one. So that does help when you're able to have that, knowing that going in. So we did have obviously comments and related to the retail component of that, where they have 2 on site and are projecting that there are 2 available off-site parking spaces to be the on-street that's available along Commonwealth Avenue. And we did comment, at least in the last letter, and again, I would have to fully read through the full response what they provided last Friday, but in the past letters about the availability using the parking study information they had from 2023 for that on-street parking on Commonwealth Avenue. I know there, the one item of, I don't want to say concern, that might be the wrong word, but the item that TC brought up in its letter was whether or not the parking that was defined in that parking study was related to the peak month. And that's only really a item that we bring up as a comment, because of where we were in the overall utilization, which was, again, even as Randy noted, 80 to 90% in that peak parking demand during, I believe it was May 2023. So if there's a differentiation in the peak month or whatever that may be, and there's an extra space or 2 at the peak time, does that really change the aspects of what we'd want to show for available parking on site versus off site? Now in this area, May is kind of that mixed month of, school's still in session, some people are on vacation. It is nice how people are utilizing those spaces for what's in West Concord to walk around. So there's no direct data that I believe that was in the original comment letter, although I'll look to see what's obviously in the more recent stuff from Friday, but for what would qualify as the peak month here. But there's not a lot of data that you can go to get for that, because a lot of that is area specific. I will admit to that. So West Concord is different than, Boston is different than Lowell is different than, even Sudbury next door. So for what you're going to get for what the peak month would be, it all, and depending on the area, West Concord is a retail area. We would expect that the retail area is a kind of a year-round type item, unless there's a reason that an individual tenant is closed. So there's no reason to believe that May wouldn't be the peak month. And unless there's really, really good data that would say otherwise, there's nothing to say that that wouldn't be. It's not something that we would necessarily be pushing on directly when we get to ZBA about this is something to outright reject for, but it's just something that we wanted to bring up in a comment to make sure we understand that, we are close at 90%, and it would be more reassuring if there was just a little more data to say that we're not going to go too much further than that. in any of the sense. But we're also not going to be collecting data 365 days a year, because that's an unreasonable aspect as well. So,
And what about the fact that, you know, our zoning requirements for 1,000 square feet ask for 4 parking spots? Do we ignore that?
well, I don't think we have to, because I think that we do have also in the bylaw that says that within a certain distance of the property where there's other municipal parking available, that the availability can be used to use that. Now, showing that it can be used is the other part of that, where the parking study does come in. So there was a parking study that was part of this to show that there are available spaces. So in a retail sense, 1,000 square feet, I mean, there is a zoning bylaw in place for what 1,000 square feet means in that sense. 1,000 square feet in a real life situation for retail. You can think about the other types of retail that we do see along this stretch of Commonwealth Avenue in West Concord. And we're not talking about box stores either. So we're talking about a lot of boutique type shops. We're talking, you know, some that might end up being a small apparel retailer or something like that. Something that would fits in the comforts of what you would usually see in West Concord. And is that something that necessarily warrants at 1,000 square feet, which isn't a very, very large size, would necessarily warrant 4. So with the on-street parking available, TC itself doesn't have any real discomfort knowing that the on-street parking is available in the area to be able to support what's going to be there.
Okay,
I
thank you.
guess my concern, Sam, is that 90% is an observation at one point in time, or maybe over a couple points in time, but we all know there's a confidence interval around your 90%. And guess what? You can't go over 100%. So in terms of your observations, so if the confidence interval is 5, plus or minus 5%, you're good. If it's plus or minus 15%, somebody's circulating all the time. To me, that I never see the confidence intervals of these statistics. So I don't know if you have a thought on what that might be.
No, and I think this goes back to, again, the comment that we had for what is the peak month of the area, because that's really going to be, I mean, the day that the counts were done, it wasn't a day that was snowing. It wasn't, well, I mean, it's May, so, but it wasn't a day that's inherently going to be showing that a lot of people would not necessarily be parking. It's not it wasn't a Sunday morning. It wasn't a day that school was off. It wasn't things like that. So there's a reasonable aspect, unless, again, we could be counting every day of the week for 365 days a year, which is necessarily an unreasonable ask, especially on the applicant side. Not to say that, and again, I think I brought this up in the recommendations when we were talking about the parking zoning, it is up the applicant to provide that data to you. So this goes back to knowing whether or not this represents what would be considered a peak month. And although there might not be site-specific data, knowing that this area is heavily parked by the boutique type retail and the small type restaurants, what information is available through just general public record, even if it's outside of West Concord, that could show that May is just the typical month for that kind of location.
It's also the time, and I think the intervals was 11 to 1 in the day, but I just from personal experience, I will be happy to go to West Concord at 11, but I will not go to West Concord at 1, because there's a big difference in terms of the amount of parking on the streets. So just FYI.
We have a concern, obviously. Woods Hill Table takes up a tremendous amount of space when they're open, okay? The old 99, if you want to go there, you're hard pressed to find a place to park. Now, that's probably in the evening, which shouldn't impact you, but, it's still a concern, okay?
Yeah.
Can I offer a little bit to the conversation? There's some information we put in the memo last week that I don't think Sam may have seen yet, so I think it's important for the board to hear it, if that's okay.
Go ahead.
Yes, please.
So,
thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate the time. Thank you. So a couple things. I mean, obviously it's a downtown village environment and doesn't have a ton of outdoor seating. So, and if it did, you would think the summer would be the high point, but knowing a few close friends from VHB that actually live just right there, like literally right down Lawsburg Road, they tell me absolutely 100%. It's when school's in session. In the summer, everybody's at their lake house or their Cape house or doing things. So just put that aside for a second. That's just sort of the observation that I've been made aware of. We Sam is exactly right. I wish we had strong data that has every month of the year out there to be able to point to you and say, hey, it's absolutely at least the normal month, if not the peak month. The only thing we did find, and we presented in the response to comment memo, is the Urban Land Institute in their shared parking manual says that May is one of the highest months for retail and dining parking outside of the holiday period. In fact, it's the highest outside of the holiday period. And so knowing what's there and the types of uses, I think there's some level of confidence that it's at least a normal month, if not the peak month. But I don't know that we're going to be able to drill down any further to provide any additional information. I thought that was a useful data point to present.
It's Mother's Day.
I have a couple of questions for Sam. So first of all, it is quite recent that our West Concord on-street parking has changed from metered parking to uncontrolled parking, which means that it's newly possible for people to use on-street parking for long-term car storage. And I wonder if you have anything to say about how that might affect people who would want to have more than one car and use on-street parking, thus making less available when we're already at peak, a 90% condition. Do you think this has bearing? Do you have anything to say about this, or do you not have anything to say?
I don't have any for what you just described. Do you mean, for instance, that you would have the expectation that residents from, say, Brookside would park on street for nighttime and stuff like that, knowing that there's no fee? Is that what you meant by that, or forgive me if
Yes,
I'm
but
wrong?
not only nighttime, that you might say, well, whether you live in Brookside or at 166 Commonwealth, you might say, I'd like to have two cars and I'll put one in my designated parking space and I will just leave the other on the street night and day until I actually have a use for that car, and then I'll go walk over there and use my car.
I don't think you can park overnight.
Why not? People don't, but except when there's a snow emergency, I don't believe that it's.
I thought overnight parking was not allowed in Concord
During summertime? Of course, if it's not allowed during winter, you're in trouble, but I just thought I would bring the question up.
Might be wrong, but I didn't think overnight parking was
Not at all?
on public
Okay,
streets.
I'm not sure on that score.
Yeah.
And my other question for you, Sam, is the three, I don't know how familiar you are with this, these maps, surveys, but I noticed that projects like 50 Baharrel and Warner Woods and the Prescott are of a substantial size. And the larger a project, the more economy of scale there is in terms of an extra person just when somebody else happens to be away on vacation taking their car. Do you have concerns about the small scale of this project making it more difficult to hold it down to a single space per unit?
That's kind of a mixed yes or no, but here's why for each of those answers. So, and I think I mentioned this again, going back to the parking zoning items that we talked about months ago with the board. With the smaller the site, there is that chance that you obviously do have less wiggle room, let's put it, in terms of what you can and cannot do. That being said, based on the way at least the applicant has described it, where you are tenanted one space, it's not a free for all necessarily, it's not first come, first serve. You are signing up as you do your lease for X instead of a particular Y, for instance, for what you may be allowed for spaces, going in what you're getting yourselves into. Now, again, that doesn't necessarily stop someone from grabbing a second car after the lease is signed and stuff like that. And I think that's maybe the case for almost anything. But when we talk about I guess, on a holistic scale of what MAPC was looking at. It wasn't just these overall 3 sites in Concord, although those were important. It was multiple sites around the Boston region that we're looking at that same 1 per unit, which may have different scales from the smaller to the bigger in terms of lot size or unit counts. So knowing that the applicant has that in their lease agreements, and maybe that's a way it has to be conditioned for something like that. There's, I guess, the concern that I would have normally for that becomes a lot less. Again, there's never going to be a perfect type scenario or a unit count for where that threshold gets met. So is it 10? Is it 20? And what threshold do we have? So unless that's something that's written directly into the bylaw, it wouldn't be something that I necessarily would say that that's individual project is that point where we would disagree or agree to what that ability to not have 1 or more spaces would be. I would say again that this particular applicant came in and noted that there's tenant specific spaces and it's part of their leasing type agreements. At least that's how it was described for again what Mr. Fowler had said earlier, and it's also in the I believe the letter as written. So that again eases my concern quite a bit. Again, you're never going to get down to full. This is perfect, but you know, we do based on knowing that they're going for the waiver process or for this. I would answer it the same way with the ZBA. You're never going to be 100% comfortable on any waiver that you're doing, but you got to understand where you are, what the applicant is trying to do, what considerations are around the area. Again, the items that are in Concord, we know are that 1% level, even though the size may be different. So I guess that's where I would come in on that.
I think the whole thing is just way too tight. I mean, my kids live in Charleston and they have assigned parking spots in their buildings, and forever somebody is parking in those spots, and then they have to drive around, and there's no place for anybody to go here if somebody's parked in their spot. Okay, I mean, I have concerns, I guess. Can I change the subject and ask another question, not relating to Sam or?
Well,
let's go ahead.
see if
Let's finish up
anyone else
with Sam.
has anything
Right.
for Sam, and I just wanted to
I'm sorry,
ask
I didn't-
Elizabeth
Yep,
as well.
Go ahead.
If she wanted Sam to bring up any other topics or issues. If not, Elizabeth?
No, I only had one question, 1 point. So I'm not aware of any other project where the parking relief for residential units was granted from 2 spaces down to 1 space per unit. Brookside Square is at 1.5. I believe the Prescott's went down to 1.5. But the one question I have, and maybe Randy can answer this, on the sight line diagram, it has landscaping being maintained at 2.5 feet, but then snow going to 3.5 feet. Is there a reason for that discrepancy?
I'm not sure there's a reason, but we typically, when we spec something out for site distance, we like to go no higher than 2.5. I think the manual says you can go to 3.5. So, the reason I say we go lower is because a lot of times people let things grow and all of a sudden it gets above the threshold real easily. So we tend to be conservative on that front. And just as a point of reference, Elizabeth, on what you just said, I think the regs for those places are what you said in terms of the units, but Brookside's operating based on the count at 1.12. Warner Woods is operating at 0.95, and Prescott at the Concord is operating at 1.09 based on the MAPC studies. So they provided more parking than what the demonstrated need is suggesting. Just point for information.
No, and I understand and appreciate the point, but again, it leaves no room for visitor parking whatsoever. And at those ratios, when that happens, at least a couple of tenants can have guests over and there may be available parking. And the same thing with Brookside Square. So again, as Sam said, you're never going to be able to get the perfect project.
Oh, okay, thank you. And so Mark, you had another,
Natural resources, have they weighed in on this, Elizabeth? I mean, there's some concerns about the open space versus the building space. Has that been resolved?
So I don't know what the update is with the applicant going through the Natural Resources Commission. They have to go through for an order of conditions, but the commission would not necessarily provide that type of recommendation to the Board of Appeals regarding the usability of open space for the tenants. That would be more part of this board through site plan review. From natural resources standpoint, any redevelopment of this site is going to be an improvement over the current conditions.
I agree.
As far as the impact to, but they would not provide that type of recommendation to the Board of Appeals. That would be more part of the site plan.
Okay.
do you have questions on the open space?
Well, yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
there is a zoning bylaw that says it has to be 50% open space compared to the building. Is that correct, Elizabeth?
That for the residential units, correct?
That's correct. Okay, so there isn't a whole lot of open space on this property.
There are, the roof space counts, which
Right.
is not all
Roof space counts,
open space,
Right.
but some of it is.
right?
But that, you have a good question. I actually don't know. What is the percentage?
It's, I believe it's shown on the plan.
And maybe you've told us that, and if you did, I apologize. I'm sorry. There's a lot of information here and I did my best to decipher it, so.
I believe on the, on sheet 2, there's an open space calculation. Required open space is 44,633 base plus or minus square feet, and the open space provided is 10,423 square feet. But it's my understanding, when we had this discussion at first with Elizabeth, that there's virtually no projects that meet that requirement, the open space requirement. And here, as we point out, not only do we have the open space availability on the roof and so forth, and open space adjacent to the Neshoba Brook, but we've got open space available in the immediate neighborhood, including access to the rail trail and ride out playground and other opportunities. And it's my understanding that those considerations on other projects of taken into account in terms of providing the waiver or the special permit to reduce the open space.
Speaking of neighborhood accessibility, that reminds me, I meant to ask, an earlier version of your plan showed a crosswalk to the pocket park at the Warner's Pond Dam, and that is no longer present shown on your plans, and I wondered what happened there. People might not be broadly aware that that is a pocket park because it has not been improved because there was no way to get to it. And it was exciting to me when I saw that you were showing a crosswalk which would give access to the pocket park. But there have been a lot of changes. And that was an early version of the plan, and I just wonder what changed.
I cannot comment to that. I don't know if Oliver can comment on that aspect of it or not. We have to get back to you on that.
Sure, that was toward the north end of the site, not quite all the way to the, yeah, okay. I don't need an answer to that right now. Sorry, I sort of took
Okay.
open space off
Fine.
track, but it was
Okay.
slightly related. And also speaking of open space, you showed early on a tree at the southeast of the site, and then you removed it because you put a dumpster there, but you have now removed the dumpster. And I wondered if you had considered putting a tree back. It was at the corner of the building that was to the southeast.
Right, I think there's, I'm looking at the dot, can you bring sheet 2 up? I think it shows a landscaped area there.
There is a landscaped area there, and I remember a rendering early on showed a tree there, but that was before there was a dumpster there, but now it's gone.
I was looking for the landscape plan to see what that shows.
Hi, this is Steve Cosmos, the landscape architect. To answer your question, unfortunately, the tree space got smaller. So the tree had been removed. And also, I do think that the snow situation might be a bit of a conflict for a tree there, since they're going to probably push the snow in both directions. So
I see.
that's why it's not there.
Okay, well, that explains.
But we do have room for a tree. I mean, I could certainly add, I mean, I wouldn't put an enormous tree, but I could certainly add a smaller tree in there. We have quite a palette on the site of plants, so it would be certainly easy to add something that would fit there. We've used a lot of smaller trees along the river.
Well, trees are always good, all other things being equal, but only if it can be a tree with a decent chance of surviving.
Yeah, so I would say that it would probably benefit from some sort of a post in front of it to keep it from being hit. But you know, those kinds of precautions are common for trees that have to live near streets. So
Yes, and it would be right next to a parking space, but so are a great many other trees.
right, it would certainly soften that corner of the building.
Yes, yes, it would.
So we can do that.
While I'm going through my list of questions that don't have to do with circulation and parking, well, this sort of does have to do with it. You have made the exit onto Commonwealth Avenue toward the Rotary exit only, and you have, this is not a landscape question, obviously, you have made it, the exit be, angled so that people can't turn to the left. But then there's a truck mountable wedge with, cobbles or concrete or rumble strip or something of that nature. And I wondered, since people are required to turn to the right, what is the purpose of having that extra truck mountable area? Why not just make it be ordinary sidewalk?
Good question. It's a mountable curb because it needs to be, you know, accommodable to the fire apparatus. And, you know, to make that happen, you have to have a much wider section. We wanted to narrow it and push it, you know, toward the right to, you know, make the normal motor vehicle, you know, exit to the right, as opposed to have the ability to make it easy left. And so the mountable provides the extra width that's necessary for the fire apparatus, but it narrows it down and forces the motor, you know, standard car to the right. That's what the purpose is.
Okay, so it's for fire apparatus. I was
It is.
imagining delivery trucks taking advantage of it to turn left, which they're not allowed to do, but if it is required for fire apparatus, then that's the way it is. Thanks.
Anything else on your list?
No, no, thank you.
Rob, anything? So perhaps we can see if there are any questions or comments from the public. I don't know if there's But we can take one in the room here before we find out about our Zoom audience. Yes, Sven.
Yes, certainly will 50 better now. So there's a certain amount of parking lots that is assumed to be that outsourced to public parking along the street. And I just want to remind everyone that these are financed by taxpayers, and that in 2019 the town did a study, parking policy review, that recommended if things like that are done, that there should be a fee in lieu of parking requirements per parking spot. I think that would be a good idea, given the town just cut down the budget for parking maintenance. And also for just thinking that the general taxpayer should not just pay generously for ongoing maintenance for things that are used by situations like this. So whatever the parking amount is that is assumed in a project like that they use public parking, it would be a good idea to think about a fee for that.
That's an interesting comment. Thank
It is.
you.
Yeah, no, it's a good point.
Yes,
I'm not
very
sure
much
that-
so.
The planning board can assess these, but we can
No,
certainly-
but we could recommend it as a condition of approval and then let it.
No, I think we need to make
I
that
think-
part of the whole parking study.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think
I think
that's
that's
right.
for
Let's boot it over
down
the
the road.
parking
Yes,
study.
right. So,
Yeah.
You have,
We have, thank you.
I can't read the name right on. Honore Weiner.
Honor Weiner.
Honore Weiner.
Honora, yes, it's Honora Weiner, 1011 Main Street. I have two questions and then a comment. At the zoning board meeting, there was a suggestion that the handicap parking space did not meet standards, and I'm confused. I just wanted to make sure that the size of that space was increased to meet the standard, and I didn't hear that happened. Is that?
It was, the van accessible crosshatch area is now, it was 5 feet on the prior iteration of the plan and has been increased to 8 feet to meet the requirement.
Okay, thank you. And I also had a question about, it's hard to know the extent of families that might be interested, but has there been consideration to a school bus possibly coming to pick up children in that area, if the school bus has adequate space to come into the area to do that kind of pickup?
so
School bus system. Step on the street.
street, right.
Yeah, they put on their flashers.
Right.
Yeah, which is probably be right in front of the building and then.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. That's an
And
interesting.
the other comment from me is, again, I live down the street, I frequent West Concord, and the variability in available parking spaces is great. And it's, even if you went on a day like today when school is out and it's, there's not a lot of traffic, that's very different. But any weather condition, a little bit of ice, a little bit of snow, a little bit of rain, really impacts the amount of space and parking. And I think that relief from 14 spaces, in addition, which are necessary, but in addition, you're talking about visitors and other people coming. I think the impact on street parking in West Concord is enormous. And I would hope the planning board would take that seriously because it will impact the nature of West Concord significantly. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Are there any other?
I don't see anyone else.
Not seeing anyone else. Then I'll thank everyone. And I believe our next action would be to continue this discussion I believe that you mentioned that you'll be meeting with the zoning board late next month.
28th of March.
I'm sorry, the
28th.
28th.
That was their first available slot.
Okay, so, Elizabeth, would you suggest that we continue this to our next available slot, which would be March 12th, or we could go out, which would be the same day as our public hearing, or we could go out to April 2nd? Do you have a preference?
We would obviously like to have the meeting before the ZBA meeting and not after.
Okay, so, then it would be agreeable to, have the next meeting March 12th. And, Heather, do you know
So
if we're
that-
having?
That's a decision. So that's a decision for the board. Generally, the board does not
Right,
put any other items on your agenda for your public hearing for town meeting, but March is a very complicated month
Yes,
because of all the
sure.
public hearings. And so I don't think there is an opportunity. You either put it on for the 12th or you put it on for April 2nd. There really isn't any other opportunity in March for you to try and find another day. You have a
no,
public workshop on March 27th.
Right, no, I don't think we were suggesting a different day. It was either March 12th or April 2nd. And I believe the applicant felt that, March 12th was, okay. And are you agreeable to that?
Yes,
I'm sorry, I meant Elizabeth.
sorry.
Okay.
I would definitely need guidance for the board on what you expect to happen on March 12th.
That's our public hearing, correct?
Correct,
For the town meeting.
correct.
Pretty stacked.
Yeah.
Okay,
I would say we have to move to April.
Yeah.
I don't
April?
think we really have a
Yeah,
choice.
I'm uncomfortable trying to cram that into that schedule.
okay.
You're the boss.
No,
Yeah, but
no.
Come on.
I'm the consensus seeker. And I think I've found my consensus, I'm sorry. But I think we'll have a quorum on the 2nd of April, if that is agreeable. That's our next available date. That works for you, Elizabeth? And we can say April 2nd.
That's fine.
at-
7 p.m. I don't believe we have anything else on April 2nd. I would still need direction from the board. I would still need direction from the board on, is it your hope to have a draft decision for April 2nd or,
well,
I mean, a draft recommendation?
Is there any additional information that we are waiting, from any town departments to make a
the last I saw, there were several outstanding comments to which that have not yet been resolved. Now, it sounded, based on what Mr. Falwell said, that there had been another round that we may not have seen yet, but there were
whatever
a
came in on
substantial number
Friday.
previously.
I don't know
The
how.
documents
we've
were
seen.
uploaded
Those-
tonight at 6.
Tonight at 6?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't see those.
Okay, so we have some information, but Elizabeth, how much
So
additional information are we expecting to be coming before the board? Because at some point, we will have to
well,
make a recommendation.
so I don't know what time the information came in on Friday. I left at noon, so, so I don't know if Sam, TEC needs, time to review the information that came in on Friday. So yes, all of that can happen by April 2nd. I'm not concerned about that.
From our perspective, Madam Chair, we believe we've now provided you with all of the information that's responsive to what was out there in terms of questions. And I know Elizabeth hasn't had an opportunity to see what was sent in on Friday. It's now been posted. Heather posted it this afternoon because Heather had not seen the email to Elizabeth on Friday. So we believe we've provided all the information that's required. Obviously, we understand that Sam needs to take a little bit of a closer look at the response, having not had an opportunity to do so. But we believe we're complete in terms of our proposal at this point in time.
Yes, I guess the question is.
So I would probably ask that if Heather tomorrow can forward to the engineering, water and sewer, health, police, fire, CMLP. I'll send her a list of the proper staff people, but to send them the new information and give them 2 weeks to provide a final comment letter, so that this can move forward. And, if the board wants, you can continue this to March 12th and just get a final update from me as far as comments from town staff and from Sam, if he's available, and then continue it to April 2nd for a decision, or a recommendation, sorry.
No, I think that.
That's the other alternative.
I think the consensus is that March 12th is not a good date, and it won't give everyone time to, across all those departments, if they have additional information. So I think we're talking about April 12th. Sorry, April 2nd.
Well, I'm certainly interested in seeing the follow-up information from town departments and from Sam in response to the newly submitted comments. But also, like Mr. Giddings, I am not particularly comfortable with the level of relief requested and the difficulty of circulation on the site with everything being so tight. So in terms of a draft decision, I would like to see the board have a discussion of what we would want the decision to contain. And that could be part of discussing a draft decision, but that seems like a real discussion for the board to undertake, in my opinion.
Yes, it will be a real discussion.
Right, yeah, no, I agree.
Yes,
Considering we're gonna
but
have
it's,
two
but
other members
we
probably
can't
at
just
meeting
keep
too.
having
Right.
more meetings or no meetings. We
That's
have to
true.
make a decision at
Yes, we
some
do.
point.
Yes. on
And
what
I
we would
think
recommend.
April 2nd, if that's, if the applicant believes that
The
what-
information is
the
complete.
information is complete,
Mm.
and if we have adequate time for town departments to weigh in, then it seems to me that
That's-
that would be a meeting at which we should be prepared to make a decision. And I think that hopefully there'll be 6 of us there who can render whatever the decision is, so that the zoning board of appeals can have our recommendation.
I agree.
Yeah,
Okay,
sounds like a plan.
okay,
Yeah.
thank you all, and thank you very much for all the work you're doing and being responsive to us, and we look forward to seeing you on the 2nd, and you be in contact with Elizabeth if you have follow-up questions.
Thank you.
Elizabeth, do we need a motion,
Yes.
Elizabeth?
to continue?
No, you do not, since you're only making a
Okay.
recommendation.
Thanks.
Um,
Thank you.
Yes,
But,
so thank you
um,
again, Mr. Falwell.
But I would like, I would like to point out, I will not be back to the office till March 4th. So don't expect a reply from me until then.
Fine. Not to worry.
No, but we have until April 2nd.
Second,
Right.
yes.
So I think
Well, good.
we're good. Okay. And now we got all our public comments. Yes. So now on to administrative business. And so our first item here is any general public comment, which will be limited to up to 15 minutes with no more than 3 minutes allocated to any one speaker. And general public comment would be limited to items that are not on the agenda. I will turn to either Heather or Rob to say, is there anyone on Zoom? Would you make any comments? Thank you. Okay, so then we will move along to comments on the draft of the MBTA community zoning site plan rules and regulations from bookend this meeting with discussions of rules and regulations. So we received a first draft from our consultant, and we are to make up a list of items with Heather taking notes as well as Elizabeth on areas of discussion to pass on to the consultant. Would anyone like to start?
I haven't done my homework.
You
I'll
haven't
be
done
honest.
I did my homework, submitting it at 6 PM today, which is
Fine.
not particularly better than doing my homework, of
Okay.
not having done it.
Rob, would you? Okay. So I have a lot of comments.
I bet you
But
spent
I
a lot of time on it.
really like
Right.
to have more friends than comments. So I will submit my comments tomorrow morning because they're all here. But on
So
that,
Linda,
so Elizabeth, would you?
Linda, I can't say for your schedule. So your next meeting is March 6th. So Emily will be at that meeting to go over her presentation for the public workshop and talk to the board about the format of the workshop. And there's time for the planning board to, provide additional comments on, the draft regs. She's gonna
Yes,
take
and in
comments
fact,
from the workshop.
Two members who are not here either tonight, who I'm sure will have comments that they'd like to make. And so yes, I'm sorry, I interrupted.
No, that's fine. So I do think that even written comments, we can just forward them to Emily and she can, address written comments, that board members have as well.
Fine. All right. We have no minutes, so now, are there any liaison updates or planner updates? Do you have anything on?
Well, there was a meeting tonight with the Hampshire Field
Yes.
Advisory where they were getting a presentation from the builder on the Northfield project, okay? But there is a meeting at the Middlesex Vocational Technical School on March 4th at 6 PM, where the developer is gonna go over the project as well. So I think if you're interested, it's, a hybrid meeting. You can go there, you can do it on Zoom. If you have any questions about it, let me know.
You said Middlesex, but did you mean Minuteman?
Minuteman, yeah, so.
Yeah, one of
Minuteman.
those
Oh.
trisyllabic
Middlesex,
M things,
you know, So, one of those places, so.
Okay, yeah, I think hybrid is good for me.
Right. Yep.
But I would like to,
So we'll see. We
that.
haven't seen the report
still.
from the environmental people yet. I suspect that we will see that shortly. We asked for a copy, we haven't seen it yet, so, okay, stay tuned.
Okay, thank you. Anything going on with?
I
CPC?
attended the CPC meeting, but I don't feel there's anything really to bring back to the planning board now.
Nothing on travel, I mean, transit, sorry.
Okay. Okay, Elizabeth, any updates?
I have no updates, except if you're interested, I sent a picture to Heather. She can show people the new big cat we have in our backyard up here.
Great. Enjoy the rest
Yep.
of your
Yeah.
vacation.
Enjoy it.
Vacation.
And everyone have a good rest of the evening. So, and next meeting, is this right, Elizabeth? We will do a run through. Hoping of our presentations for the public hearing. To one, make sure
Yes,
everybody's
so,
familiar.
Yep, so I will be the presentation for Rob and Andrew are fairly simple. Sue's your presentation, Linda and I chatted about it, and I really think it is one slide that kind of, here's an example of syntax, here's an example of grammar, here's an example of the wrong word. And then if somebody has a question about a specific item, we will have the whole warrant available where you could just bring up the actual warrant article and address the question, but there's absolutely no way we can make a slide for every single correction.
No, and I have been thinking about it, and I had been thinking about, 12 of this kind and 3 of that kind, but your suggestion sounds excellent to me. One certainly wouldn't attempt to cover them all.
Right. And if you
So
have
that
any-
is one thing I will be trying to do while on vacation. So you can at least get that probably the afternoon of the 4th. But your presentations will be easy. Linda, I don't know what we're doing.
I don't either, but I have a couple weeks, so if Heather has the, whatever,
Format?
the formatting, if you could send that to me, then I can start playing around with ideas. On that note, have a
Sounds good.
great rest of your vacation, and don't be thinking about us.
Thank you.
Thanks, Elizabeth.
Thanks.
I'll
See you
try.
later.
Thank you all.